But then there were documents that were missing, such as the tip sheet about Donald Trump and other documents that were pulled down. And we thought at least those documents would be there. They're missing too. So
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Genuinely glad you are here for this one because what we are about to get into is something a lot of people are still trying to wrap their heads around. Congressman Khanna sat down to talk about what he actually witnessed when he reviewed the Epstein files firsthand, and what he found inside those rooms is raising serious questions about who knew what, who is still being shielded, and why certain documents that were supposed to be available have simply vanished. This is not a conversation about speculation. This is a sitting member of Congress describing what he saw with his own eyes. Trust me when I say you want to stay until the very end, because the final part of this conversation takes a turn that I genuinely did not see coming, and it changes how you look at the entire picture. Also, I would love to know where in the world you are watching this from. Drop your city or country in the comments right now. It honestly means a lot to see where this community reaches. All right, let us get into it.
well, they're named as co-conspirators in these documents, and some of the co-conspirators' names are redacted appropriately because they may be survivors, and they are women, so at the very least, and so we don't know if they're survivors or not. But they're also caught up in this men, some prominent men from other countries, some prominent men from our country, and there was no reason that Massey or I could see for why those names should be redacted, other than protecting people from embarrassment, which the law clearly says you cannot do.
Is there more you can say on these men? I mean, you mentioned a foreign government and some prominent individuals in this country. What exactly are the contours that you know and can share?
Well, we are calling on the Justice Department to release them, and I hope they will because it's so blatant. And maybe it was a oversight. I don't know, but it looks like these men were being protected for some reason. So we're working through the avenues to get these names released through the Justice Department.
As you were looking through the files today, was there anything additionally that you learned or surprised you or anything that jumped out at you?
Just the gruesomeness of some of the acts. I mean, there were violent images. There was real abuse of these young girls. There are prominent people who are talked about as having had sex or raped these underage girls because those names are blotted out as survivors, but it's obvious that prominent individuals did that. And the sense that so many of our elite were caught up in this. The thing that angers me is that America has not had a moral reckoning like Britain is having, like other countries are having. I mean, how is Howard Lutnick there when he is all over the files and he's still a commerce secretary? He's had no accountability. I mean, the British government may fall because of Mendelssohn, and here you've got Commerce Secretary Lutnick who has financial interactions with Epstein after he was convicted of pedophilia, alleged financial allegations, and he's still there.
That's actually a good segue. I'm glad you brought this up. For those who might not be familiar, the former UK ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson, has lost his job and his authorities, his roles in wake of revelations tying him to Epstein. And so on a finer point, I'm curious, this is a very specific example, but there are several nations undergoing these kinds of rifts and reckonings with regards to these powerful individuals in their own countries, investigating them or pushing for them to step down. What do you make as a member of Congress specifically of figures, let alone President Trump or Elon Musk, but specifically someone like Howard Lutnick as well, being shielded from even earnest investigation that you and Massey and others are pushing for?
Well, it's trivializing to the survivors. It shows that we are not really taking it seriously as Americans, the way other countries are. I mean, either we're going to have a moral reckoning or we're not. We've exposed a lot of these men. They're being shamed online, but that's not enough. There has to be actual accountability. They need to be held accountable for the jobs they have at the very least. I mean, there need to be investigations if they've committed crimes. And until we have elite accountability, we're going to see an erosion of trust in the very democratic project. And that's why I coined the phrase Epstein class. That's why I said that this Epstein class needs to be held accountable and needs to go.
Representative Jamie Raskin today said that after reviewing the documents, there was evidence of victims as young as 9 years old. Is this something that you or your colleagues encountered as well as while you were scrolling through these files? And how do you react to something as shocking as that?
Yes, they were, and some of those documents are already public. Now, some of those documents, the reason that the sender has been redacted is that there could be a potential survivor who's also being the sender, and there are certain survivors who may have been caught up in also being part of Epstein's sex trafficking network. But in certain cases, the redactions make no sense, and they're protecting people. And so, what you see is the Justice Department in a few cases having done appropriate jobs to redact, but having not redacted a lot of the main documents that are protecting this Epstein class.
This is where the entire defense of these redactions falls apart, because Khanna, a sitting U.S. congressman, just said something that deserves everyone's full attention. He said there was no legitimate legal reason for those names to be redacted. The only explanation that made sense to him was protecting people from embarrassment, and the law, he said, explicitly prohibits that as a justification. That is not a political take. That is a congressman citing the actual statute on camera. Then he goes further. He brings up a current cabinet official, someone confirmed and seated right now, and raises the question of how that appointment was ever made, given what these documents reportedly show. And he is not describing someone who crossed paths with the wrong person at a party years ago. He is describing documented financial interactions that allegedly occurred after a federal conviction, after the public record already existed, after there was no ambiguity about who anyone was dealing with, and the official response to that? A cabinet seat, business as usual. Here's the contrast that should not be ignored. Overseas, an entire government is facing serious political consequences over documented connections to these same events. Real accountability, happening in real time. Meanwhile, the person Khanna is describing is still holding a title and showing up to work. That gap between two different responses to the same set of facts tells you a great deal about which institutions are functioning and which ones are not.
Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share and subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
You've spoken about the sort of haphazard ways that these files have been redacted. From what you could tell, were there files that you were perhaps expecting to see or looking for, or ones that you noticed that were in fact just missing?
Yeah, well, that's a great point, and Massey made the same point. There are two problems. One is the prosecution memo, which talked about who else should be charged. All of that was still redacted in the version we saw. The statements from survivors to the FBI naming other men, particularly in the United States, all of that was still redacted. But then there were documents that were missing, such as the tip sheet about Donald Trump and other documents that were pulled down. And we thought at least those documents would be there. They're missing too. So it's obvious that the FBI had gone through documents and protected certain people. They don't even hide that. They were very clear that the FBI was doing this. Then they sent those files over to Justice. Some of Justice actually probably did their job. They were going through documents that already were redacted, protecting survivors' identity. In certain cases, they missed that. In certain cases, they overprotected people who were predators. But the reality is, they were given a set of documents that already had the redactions. So I don't blame actually the assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York as much as I blame the political leadership that told the FBI and the grand jury to redact this before the lawyers even saw them at Justice.
Let's talk about that political leadership a bit more. I mean, you mentioned how you coined the term the Epstein class. Tell us a bit more about the genesis of how you got to that term and what it means to you, and how do you view that as a sort of oppositional term to run on?
Rich and powerful people feel they were above the law. They think that their law doesn't apply to them, that they have done so well in life, either by building companies or making money or their status, that they are part of this elite club and they don't have to deal with ordinary things like rules. They don't have to worry about discarding or raping a young girl or being part of that if it's for their own gratification or their own social status. And so the Epstein class is a group of people who do not believe that the rules apply to them, who act with impunity. And my belief is that for the Democratic project to succeed, we need to begin with elite accountability. We need to begin with the prosecution and at least investigation of these people, the holding them accountable in public, and not just of this Epstein class, but the impunity that we see the Trump administration acting with the killing people in the Caribbean, with the ICE agents who are killing Renee Good and Alex Pretty and American citizens, with the people who dismantled agencies without any authorization. If you have lawlessness, if you have the rule of individuals based on whim, then you do not have democracy. And until there is public accountability of the elites, we're not going to restore the democratic project.
There's a lot of people in our live chat, a lot of viewers who are the first thing they said to you was thank you, Representative Khanna, for pushing on this. And you're kind of getting at this sort of deep structural imbalance where it seems like there's a pretty broad consensus amongst the American public for what should happen here. And yet there is this impunity that you talk about that seeps into other ways that this administration behaves. Where does this go from here? How does the public reconcile with that? What are they supposed to do?
This is the part of the segment that stopped me completely, because what Ro Khanna describes here is not about redactions anymore. This is something else. When he and Congressman Thomas Massie went to review what were supposed to be the fully unredacted files, the ones the public was promised access to, they discovered that certain documents were not just redacted, they were not there at all. A tip sheet involving a major public figure, gone, not blocked out, not partially obscured, simply absent from what was supposed to be the complete record. And Khanna does not blame the lawyers who did the final review. He traces the decision upstream. He says the redactions and removals were directed at the FBI and grand jury level before the material ever reached the people at Justice who were supposed to assess it fairly. By the time it arrived for review, the protection had already been built in. The process was not corrupted at the end. It was structured that way from the start. Then he says something I think deserves to outlast this one interview. He says that if you have rule by individuals operating on personal whim rather than rule of law, you do not have a democracy. That is not dramatic language. That is a clinical definition, and history consistently backs it up. Societies that shield their most powerful members from the same accountability structures that apply to everyone else do not stay stable. The erosion tends to be quiet at first, then suddenly it is not.
The public needs to elect people to Congress and the Senate and ultimately the presidency who are going to hold people in power to account. Why is it that for decades we haven't seen justice here? It wasn't just that Trump protected these people and betrayed a promise. We haven't seen this for decades. I mean, the original complaint to the FBI was in 1996. Why aren't other members of Congress, haven't they come along and taken the side of the survivors? Julia Brown has been reporting on this for years. And the reason is because you offend some very powerful people. You offend people at the highest echelons of society. And these are the people who fund the super PACs. These are the people who give money to politicians. Many of the people who have been exposed are people on the left. It's some of the biggest donors to the Democratic Party. Keir Starmer, someone I knew, I met, and yet his government is at risk. And so Thomas Massie and I have made more enemies than we made friends. And that's usually not the way of doing politics. Usually the way to do politics is you want to have a politics of addition. You want to make more and more friends, not enemies. And that is why we haven't had people to actually expose the Epstein class. But Massie and I are mavericks. We're different. We've met these survivors. It's become personal. And we've said that we are willing to take the risk of offending some of the most powerful people in society to see justice.
Today, Epstein's associate Ghislaine Maxwell refused to answer questions during this closed-door congressional deposition. Her lawyer said that she's, in fact, requesting clemency. How do you respond to her refusal to answer questions?
It was an insult to the American people. Just a couple months ago, she was answering questions to Todd Blanche, and now she isn't able to answer simple questions, such as whether Donald Trump raped underage girls, whether there are other people who raped underage girls. That's not implicating her. That's simply her hiding information. And she's using it as a bargaining chip. She's saying, if you give me clemency, I'll spill the beans. I'll tell you who these people were who raped young girls on Epstein's Island. I said she needs to immediately be sent back to a maximum security prison. it is offensive that someone who engaged in this kind of abuse of young girls and who is totally obfuscating to the American people is serving in a low security prison.
Conversely, of course, as she was navigating a closed door deposition, there's also the Clintons who were requested their presence in late February. What do you make of calls to have them be present to answer questions and also their own requests to have it be in a sort of public hearing?
It should be public, but they're willing to testify, and that's a good precedent. And
What Khanna says in this final section might be the most structurally honest thing a sitting member of Congress has said publicly in a long time. And the reason it lands so hard is that he is not just pointing outward at the other side. He is describing the entire architecture, including his own. He explains why this has dragged on for decades without real resolution. When you push on this, he says, you offend powerful people, and those powerful people are the ones who fund the super PACs, on both sides. He names that some of the individuals now facing scrutiny are significant donors to his own party. He is not protecting his team. He is describing the system as it actually operates, not as anyone campaigns on. That is genuinely unusual. Most political careers are built on never saying anything that costs a donor. Khanna said it directly, on the record. Then there is the Maxwell situation. Her legal team is signaling interest in a clemency deal, but in the closed-door session with Congress, she gave nothing. Khanna called it exactly what it appears to be, information being used as a bargaining chip, a calculated decision to hold what she knows until something is offered in return. And while that negotiation plays out, the survivors at the center of all of this have no leverage, no legal team working angles, no deal to offer. They have their accounts and the hope that someone in a position of authority will actually follow through. That contrast between who gets to negotiate and who has to wait is not a footnote, it is the story. What this whole segment ultimately shows is that institutional failure is rarely accidental. It tends to reflect specific choices made by specific people to keep specific information from reaching the public. The only thing that ever meaningfully pushes back is individuals who decide their own comfort matters less than doing the right thing. Khanna and Massey both made that choice here. That is rarer than it should be. Drop your thoughts in the comments, like and subscribe if this was worth your time, and I will see you in the next one.